and freedoms of New Zealanders. New Zealanders cannot trust John Key.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Bill English.
Well, my colleague asks a very good question. How was Sir Bruce Ferguson appointed to the head of the Defence Force and then the head of GCSB? I'd ask the gossipy member for Wellington Central and proper procedure was applied in the case of Mr Ian Fletcher. Of course, the appointment of the head of GCSB is the Prime Minister's appointment. The appointment of the head of GCSB is the Prime Minister's appointment. Okay. So, Mr Speaker, despite Labor peddling gossip, they got nowhere on the issue of the appointment of Mr Fletcher as the head of GCSB, because in the end it is the Prime Minister's appointment, and that, as the Kitteridge report now makes plain, the job of sorting out the mess left by the previous Labor government with their lazy approach to intelligence is a very substantial and complex job. And it is a great thing for New Zealand that we have a Prime Minister who has been willing to take it on. The last Prime Minister clearly took no interest in the legality of the intelligence agencies, but worse than that, the previous Labor government passed a piece of legislation that was a result of the kind of shonky political deals that have upset many of the institutions in this country. The reason that we ended up with a provision in the GCSB Act that said they should, quote, not spy on New Zealanders, which paraphrases it, is because that's the only way that the Labor-led coalition of the time could get to pass the law. It was a last-minute addition thrown in by the Prime Minister of the time to get the votes in the House. That's how it happened. And the fact that provision was not properly understood, was assumed to codify existing practice, has led to the circumstances in which we find ourselves today. So, Mr Speaker, let's just pull back a bit about the context in which these discussions have been going on. This is not an issue, as the member for Wellington Central said, about, quote, whether or not New Zealanders can be spied on. The answer to that question is they can, and they are. And with a warrant, following the proper procedures, they can be put under surveillance by the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service. That was the case, still is the case, and always will be the case, because we have national security interests that are quite real, because there are real threats out there, not imagined threats, and we need agencies who have the capability of dealing with those threats. Some are external, and sometimes those threats are New Zealand citizens. And that is why the NZSIS can put New Zealanders under surveillance. So the issue is not, as the Labor Party are trying to couch it, whether the Prime Minister cares whether New Zealanders can be under surveillance. They can. Every Prime Minister New Zealand has ever had has endorsed that position. The issue here is whether the NZIS can use the GCSB to carry out some of that function. And the reason, historically, that they have used the GCSB is because they have technology no one else has, which they use for surveillance, particularly of foreign nationals, which is their territory, and they contribute to international intelligence gathering. That is the question, and the assumption has always been that they can. Up to 2003, the GCSB had no legal framework in which they were operating, and that's why it was a good thing that the previous government set out to put a legal framework in place for the operation of that agency to ensure its legality and its constitutional position. Since after the passage of that Act in 2003, the assumption remained in place that the new Security Intelligence Service could use the GCSB as an agent in its surveillance activities. When the issue came into question of whether that was legal, an issue raised by the Inspector General of Intelligence, the clear advice from the agencies was that it was legal. It was legal. And at this stage, can I just make sure we disentangle a couple of different sorts of legal questions related to the activities of GCSB. The issue of Kim.com was primarily, and still remains, an issue around his status as a citizen. It turns out he's a New Zealander under one piece of legislation and not a New Zealander under another piece of legislation. Seems bizarre, but this is what happens in legislation. The issue hadn't really been tested until his case came along. That's one set of issues, and then there's a set of issues about whether the activities of the GCSB itself are actually legal. Now, what the report has uncovered is a culture of low levels of compliance within the GCSB, a culture where people were not aware of their statutory obligations, not as aware as they needed to be of the legal processes that they should follow, and an organisation which had been operating to legal advice that is now held to be doubtful. That's right. Legal advice of experienced legal counsel who'd worked in the area for years, decades in fact, and it turns out there are questions about that legal advice. The role of the Prime Minister as the Minister in charge of these intelligence agencies has been to bring these issues to resolution. The Prime Minister initiated the Kitteridge report, and I think any parliamentarian who has read that report would acknowledge that for an independent report, it's actually hard-hitting. This is not the report of someone who doesn't understand the issues or has tried to soft-soap them. This is probably the toughest report on the intelligence agencies that we have seen in a long, long time. So the Prime Minister has raised those issues and initiated the Kitteridge report. The question has arisen around the timing of actions. And I go back to what I said in question time. No one in this process can act on what they don't know before they know it. Of course, it would be a reasonable expectation that if the Prime Minister had been handed, or the head of GCSB had been handed advice that said those activities are not legal, they should be stopped, then those activities would have stopped when that advice turned up. As it happened, that kind of advice turned up around the time of October, when the GCSB actually did put a stop to a range of activities because of doubt about the legality of those activities. And again, I would stress, even as of today, it is still not clear whether the activities we're referring to here are illegal or not illegal. It's still not clear. The Prime Minister and the agency itself have acted with reasonably expected caution as the situation has developed and the understanding of the legal situation has developed. Of course, now that the Kitteridge report is here, it's easy to see an environment in which GCSB was operating which was not apparent then. Now that there has been 6 or 9 months of legal discussion, it's easy to sound knowledgeable about the legal issues. But if we think of the context in which the Prime Minister was first informed about these matters, it amounted to the Inspector General making a suggestion to the Prime Minister that there were questions about the legality of some of the operations of GCSB. The initial advice in response to those questions was that the operations were legal. And of course, any Prime Minister would take that position very seriously. The member from the Labour opposition is simply wrong to assert that the Prime Minister did not act with the seriousness every New Zealander would expect of a Prime Minister dealing with these significant national security issues. When it became significant enough that there was doubt over the legality of the operations of the GCSB, those operations were stopped, and then the Kitteridge report was put in place. That report has yielded the information that going back to 2003, that is, from the passage of the GCSB Act, there are 88 cases in which the question arises. It's not the case that the newspaper headlines describe that accurately. There are 88 cases in which the question arises. And of course, by today's measure, it's quite possible there are cases before 2003 where the question would arise about whether GCSB was acting consistent with the expectations. One can't say the law because at the time there was no law. So, Mr. Speaker, the process from the middle part of last year has been thorough. It has been suitably cautious in that when doubt arose, activities have been stopped. The independent oversight has been employed both through the Kitteridge report and the inspector who oversees these intelligence agencies. So, Mr. Speaker, the next step, of course, in this process is the resolution of these issues, because let's be clear, we need functional intelligence agencies. We need the ability to monitor the activities and the people that could be a threat to our national security. Of that, there is no doubt. But we need those agencies to be updated in the first place because of the massive changes in technology since their legislation was put in place, even as recently as 2003. We need the agencies to be updated, but we also need the agencies themselves to be reformed. These are agencies with less transparency than your average government department. They're not subject to competition or contestability. If they are left alone for a long time, they can end up, as is shown in the Kitteridge report, as agencies who have lost the awareness of their need to be compliant. So, Mr. Speaker, the government is moving to expose all of these issues. The Prime Minister has worked extensively over recent months to bring forward resolutions to these issues, and we would expect that over the next couple of months both this House and the Intelligence Committee will have the opportunity to debate fully the means by which this situation that has arisen can be corrected, but more important than that, the steps that this Parliament should take in order to upgrade and modernise our system of national security.
Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Green Party to speak on this urgent debate related to the Kitteridge report on the Government Communications Security Bureau.